Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Pointed in the Right Direction YouTube channel. I am Jeff Solberg, and this is around my book, Pointed in the Right Direction. Just discussed finger amputation. We discuss everything. We have friend of mine that we've been amputees for close to the same amount of time. Um, I will say he's missing more digits. More limbs. Let's call it correct there. More limbs than but it's been a journey, and he is open to telling us all the ins and outs, struggles, challenges, triumphs, and everything. Today, we welcome Mr. Rex Burruss. And let's start off with your story or stories, because your limb differences didn't all happen at the same time.
Sure. December 30th of 2016, I died the first time. Um, I had a massive heart attack. It is a very rare heart attack called a left ventricular rupture. So I blew a hole in the ventricle of my heart. Pretty substantial. They say that it is a very rare occurrence. It happens only to men in their 50s, typically very fit and usually tall. Well, I had three of the four criteria going. I was a gym nut. I was in my 50s, and I was male. The thing that they said didn't make sense was that I wasn't tall. But they say most men, when it happens, they keel over dead immediately. Um, that afternoon, I was rushed to the hospital, had multiple procedures performed, including two open heart surgeries that afternoon and the next morning. I flatlined on them several times, but they managed to revive me each time. Um, During the procedures, vasal inhibitors were administered to move all circulation from my extremities to my chest cavity to keep as much function in my heart and lungs as possible. Um, Unfortunately, there was a known side effect to that drug, and it kicked in 2 days later while I was in an induced coma. Um, my extremities started turning black. The known side effect is gangrene, and I suppose they were willing to take a chance with the drug because they didn't expect me to survive anyway. They told my father that I would probably not survive the surgery, but they were trying everything possible. So my hands and feet started turning black. When I awoke from the coma, um, induced was about 3 days, but they could not get me to come back around. So there I lay with everything turning black. I finally woke up 3.5 weeks later as they were moving me from the ICU to a physical therapy center, a rehabilitation center. Um, so I woke at that point and didn't know what was going on, was told the next day what had happened to me, and that I would be facing multiple amputations if in fact I continued to live. At that point, they were not certain. Um, so when I started looking around, I realized while talking to the doctor that I had dropped about 50 pounds while I was in a coma, and my fingers on my right hand were as black, I'm sorry, on my left hand were as black as my shirt, and my toes on both feet looked just the same. They were dead. Um, Within a couple of weeks, as they were dressing my left foot, when they took the dressing off one morning, what had been just the toes was now the entire foot. So it was now purple, and it very quickly turned to black as well. So several months later, I did begin the process because I had to heal my heart enough initially to even go under anesthesia again. But I was told that the leg had to go, that the infection was such that if I did not undergo amputation that day, that I would be dead in 2 days' time. I thought, well, I've already been dead a few times. It wasn't so groovy. Let's try and avoid that. So go ahead and take the leg. And as a matter of fact, I asked the surgeon if they could take the other things at the same time, figuring I could do all of my healing at one time. And they said that was impossible because there were just too many things that the pain would be too much to bear over 3 limbs. So they took the leg that day. A few months later, they they took the distal phalanges from my left hand, 2 distal phalanges, the index and the middle fingers. The gangrene had it had delineated, so they could tell exactly where they needed to amputate. If I'd had the initial amputations when they had initially told me that was necessary, they would have taken the entire fingers. But as it was, the gangrene did recede, so I only lost the distal phalanges and just beyond the first knuckle on each of these 2 fingers. Um, the same thing happened with 3 toes on my right foot. The surgery was scheduled for the toes on my right foot. Um, However, just literally the morning before, I woke up and found that the 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 distal flanges of those toes had self-amputated. They had come off. So there was no reason for them to proceed with the third surgery.
Wow. Um, so it, what was life like in the beginning?
You know, it's funny. I was just speaking with my sister-in-law over the weekend, and she was with me a lot during that time. And she said, you know, you've come such a long way. I remember the time when you thought you were done. Um, it was enormous pain, not just from the extremities, but also having gone through the open heart procedure, um, procedures plural, um, where my chest was literally open for 13 days that they couldn't close the sternum. And then afterwards, I remember laying in the hospital bed feeling as if there was a 4x4 laying across my chest with a very large man standing astride with a foot on each side pressing on my chest. So it was enormous pain. And honestly, I was not sure that I was willing to go much further because the pain was so overwhelming. And I honestly couldn't see anything in my life past that. However, 9 months in, 8 months in, I guess, they decided that my heart was still not functioning properly. I had an ejection fraction of 15, which is enormously low. That was on a good day. It averaged between 12 and 15. So they put a pacemaker in my chest. And remarkably, as soon as they restored my blood flow, it was a game changer. So that's when I knew that my life was back and that I could go forward and I could start doing the things I had done before and return to an active lifestyle.
And, that is a point I want to talk about. Early on when we have our challenges, our trauma, accident, whatever it be, um, the initial focus is all of a sudden that is your full time job, period, the end. just trying to maintain whatever it be. It, for me, I went through physical hand therapy for 8 months trying to save parts of two fingers.
Mhm.
And I was going to hand therapy 2 or 3 times a week. It was an hour drive there, hour drive back, couple hours there, and by the time you got home, you were just tanked. And it was okay, crash out. You wake up the next day and it might be the day in between. So you're trying to catch up for everything you missed the day before. And then it's just that vicious cycle,
Mhm.
of which in this journey, so 2016 was a bad year, let's call it, because that's the year of mine also. But I spent the day yesterday hiking the mountains here in Utah for over 7 hours.
Wow.
And I was just so physically taken at the end of the day, where by sheer mass, let's call it, I'm only missing 3 fingers. It's not that much, but whatever the challenge we have, it comes into play, and mental is even a bigger challenge. Early on, living with the pain, I can remember several months into my journey, I started meeting with a pain management doctor and working on how to manage the pain and everything. And at one visit early on, I looked her in the eyes and I told her, you know, there's days that I just want to chop my hand off at the wrist. And she looked at me and told me, she goes, don't even go there, because the pain is not in your hand, it's in your head. And you take that away, the pain will still be there in your head.
Absolutely.
So that is one of the things that we have to work through and come to terms with. Where are you with pain in your journey now that you're almost 9 years into it?
Well, because neuropathy was a result, I still have a lot of pain. Um, However, I find that my body doesn't respond well to painkillers. It doesn't stop the pain. All it does is make me stupid. So the only thing that I take on a regular basis is extra strength Tylenol. It's pretty effective. Um, I do keep tramadol on hand just in case. And for example, when phantom pain is kicking my backside, I will go in and grab a tramadol, but that's maybe once every month and a half or so. Um, Phantom limb pain is something that I don't know if you deal with very often with your hand. With my leg, I do all the time. It was initially horrible. Um, with the hand, I get flares every now and then, but not as extensively as I did with my leg. Um, when they took my leg, they took the bottom 10 inches off my leg, so I'm a left below knee amputee. And that's what most people can see. Um, Along the way, I was introduced to a sports chiropractor, Dr. Enrique Crespo at Marietta Chiropractic here in the Atlanta area, who does class 4 medical laser treatments. And he is specialized in working with people with limb loss. And by infusing the, the residual limb with laser He's injecting light and energy and opening up the cellular structure of the muscles and also of the nerve endings so that they're going to get more oxygen and more healing. And the net result of that is that has reduced my phantom limb pain by about 95%. So this is how I've been able to cope with it. That 95% reduction I never thought I would ever see, but this is truly a remarkable thing. And one of the things I learned along the way is that just as your doctor told you, if you took your hand, the pain is all in your brain. Of course it is, because the homunculus area of your brain has been tied via the nerves to your extremities ever since before you were born. If you were not a congenital amputee, those nerves go all the way. And so your brain is constantly sending out signals down the nerves to say, hey, what's going on down there? And when nothing comes back, the brain responds with the only tool it has. Something's wrong, it's going to result in pain. And so, one of the things about the laser treatment is that because it is hitting a sensation with electricity, basically, the electro, well, it's laser light, but it is firing, and you do feel that it's not painful, but you're getting sensation to those nerve endings. So it starts to train the brain that there is, in fact, something going on down there. So it doesn't trigger phantom pain as often. Now, with my hand, it was a big deal because, frankly, and I think this is probably going to be a surprise even to you, I found it more difficult losing the distal phalanges of two fingers than it was for me to lose my leg. When they had my prosthesis on, and since I'm below knee, the socket comes up to my knee. But when I look over my knees, and I'm in shorts most of the time, I see toes in my shoes because the prosthesis is there. And so my brain is thinking, okay, you have feet. And I do. This is my foot. It's just a mechanical device now. Um, but when I do not have my prosthetic silicone fingers on and I'm out, especially in public, um, as a graphic designer, when I'm meeting with my clients to do presentations, I tend to talk with my hands a lot. I swear I must be part Italian, but I gesture with my hands a lot, and I was very aware that my fingers were modified. When I'm at work and using a keyboard, I cannot function with those two fingers. I have to function with the 8 remaining fingers. So I was always aware anytime I looked down that my hands had been significantly changed. And so I was more and more aware of that, um, to the point that if I went in public, I would tend to keep my left hand in my pocket. Or if I was sitting at a desk at a dinner with friends or at a business meeting with a client, I try to keep my left hand under the desk at all times, because I didn't want to distract from what we were doing from that social or business interaction with my hand. Realistically, most people don't look that closely at this to realize that something's missing in the first place. If they do, I don't mind talking about it at all. But I do find that when I go public, I tend to wear silicone fingers that I found a wonderful artist, EBL Sculpture, who is on Etsy, and she makes my fingers, and she does beautiful work. Most people have no idea that the fingers that they're seeing are prosthetics. In fact, I've had many people look at me when I'm out in public and say, "Oh my God, your manicure is incredible." Thank you. Let's leave that. That's thank you. I don't tell them that someone else, 1,000 miles away, did my manicure while I was in Atlanta. But I do find it very helpful because I have neuromas at the ends of my two fingers. So the nerves on either side of the bone, just below the skin, actually are the skin is very, very thin there. And the neuromas or knots in the nerves did form. So if I hit my hand on something without the silicone covers, it's enormously painful. I I was at my desk the other day and reached down for something in my lap and missed and hit my fingers on my desktop. I'm sure that the neighbors heard me screaming because I slammed those nerves, and it felt as if an electric charge was going straight into my armpit.
And you know, that is, there's many facets to our amputations and limb loss. You know, the medical director for Point Design, my prosthetic company, or one of them, he describes it as the difference between upper and lower is we use our legs to get us around for the most part, and we use our hands to do everything else. But the world as a whole looks at things by size, bigger, faster, better, and a lot of times looks at limb loss. A leg is much bigger than a few fingers or something of that sort. I know I struggle, my biggest struggle, and you hit on it a little bit, where we have to look. We don't have touch sensation with either, but within our hands, we're using them so much more. We go to grab something and I have to look to make sure I have a good, secure hold on it. Without having that finger touch sensation, I have no clue. In haste, I'd say 1,000% increase the number of times I drop items as before my amputation. Just, you know, old dog, new trick. I don't know what exactly it is, but I'll try and just react and grab something close by, and I start to move it and realize, oh, you know, I'm just grabbing the corner of it, and 95% of the weight is out, not in my grip. And all of a sudden, the deer in the headlights, the fear in my head that, okay, it's going to the floor, whatever. Hopefully it's not a, you know, a plate that's or glass or something like that that's bust up. But those momentary anxiety issues are a big part of my world in that sense. And it's weird in the sense of I'm 9 years in, you're approaching 9 years in. I've been very comfortable in accepting and wearing my prosthetics. My typical day, I get up, I shower, I get out of the shower, and at that point in time, I put my prosthetic on. Because one of my biggest challenges is doing up my pants, you know, top button. If I don't have my prosthetic on, it takes me 4 times longer, especially if those pants just got washed and dried, you know, and they're a little bit tighter at that moment. And those struggles.
How are you with cufflinks?
I haven't ever had a pair. I'm not to your fashion
Okay.
degree. on a hick from the sticks. And this is something to just come up with because, early on, I got the button tool,
Mhm.
which was a piece of cake. You stick it through
Great.
and just pull the buttons, and that was great. But as of recently, I've switched to my Western snap shirts.
Good
So
boy.
I didn't have to carry the button tool around with me all the time. This journey that we're on um, gets expensive. I joke that, on the fitness side of things, my gym bag has quadrupled in size because I need some type of gadget, call it, to do each and everything differently
Mhm.
to make life easier. But it's, I want to say we go up and down. There's times for me that I feel my fingers more than other times. I've gone through um, with my OT, we use a tool. It's called a dolphin. It's microcurrent where we're trying to break up all the scar tissue. I've had 9 surgeries to date on my hand, and it always felt like my hand was in a fist. And for a couple of years, it's very slow process and stuff, but it slowly relaxed all that scar tissue and made things better. But that uh, hike that I did yesterday for an extended period of time, it just flat. I should have never done it, but we have to push ourselves. The night before, I went to bed. And after I got to bed, I realized that there's a storm in the neighborhood. My hand was hurting.
Mhm.
And initially I try and block things out. I have a protocol myself. I go for heat. Well, I go for elevating my heart rate while I was in bed. I can't elevate my heart rate in bed. But then I go heat and massage to aspirin, Tylenol type things. And my final resort is um, a painkiller, of which I use Lyrica because I can take that on an as needed basis versus gabapentin that you have to ramp up and ramp down.
Mhm.
But laying there in bed, I go, okay, I can sit and fight this for several hours trying to get to sleep, of which I was waking up several hours early to travel to do this hiking with a group and everything. So I just got up and took a couple of pills so I could get some sleep, of which I got very little sleep that night, added on to my experience of the day. But being 9 years into this journey, we think we get comfortable or we've figured out our life, and then little things happen that um, take us back to where we are. How do I want to say this? How, where we are open again, because within my world, I am very comfortable with my
Mhm.
prosthesis, just like you were talking about your leg and everything. You have no problem talking about it, showing it off, and everything. Well, recently I've for past 9 months, I have been taking dance lessons. And I've struggled a little bit not realizing everything all along, but my timing, dance is such a timing and rhythm, and everything was off a little bit. Something would happen. I would touch a partner and hear a click of my finger and no touch sensation. And all of a sudden, I'm going, okay, what's position of my finger? Am I going to stab them, poke them, or whatever? And all of a sudden, I'm looking at my finger to check the position. And that throws the timing way
And
off.
you also have to be cautious, or at least I do with the silicone fingers on. I have to be cautious in how I touch people or how I touch anything, that I'm not going to tear the device or break it. And of course, with your computerized fingers, there's a lot more expense if something breaks. You have to be really careful. So you have to be cautious in how you perform a dance maneuver, especially if you're partnering and holding hands. You want to make sure those fingers are not broken.
Yeah. And so I started struggling. We were getting into more advanced moves, more two-handed folds and such. And this one particular night, I was struggling big time, trying to figure out how to grab my partner's hand and everything in different positions, behind my back, overhand, doing twirls and all. And I was picking up that they were struggling just as much as me because they couldn't figure out how they were going to grab my hand. Or if my fingers had moved, all of a sudden, my fingers are in different position and it feels awkward. And so at that point in time, I took a step back and I go, let's try something. And I took my prosthesis off. And this group that I dance with, we have become real good friends, a family. And we danced the rest of the night that way. And we had a discussion afterwards. And they mentioned that they felt more comfortable because they could feel more of my hand and stuff because the prosthesis blocks part of my hand, a large percentage, basically feel my thumb and my pinky, and that's it.
Mhm.
And that was the same for me also. But
And it's a
then,
very tactile experience, so that makes perfect sense.
and so at that point, I decided that, I'll go without my prosthesis. And the first time I was at a dance event happened to be a clinic a couple of days after that. All of a sudden, barring the best way I can describe it was I felt like I was standing there naked in front of everybody.
Sure, because you are exposing yourself.
Yes, yes. And when I'm not wearing a prosthesis, um, it hang loose is what it is. I'm
Right.
walking around, hey, hang loose, Shaka Khan here. And, so at that point in time, everyone's looking at my hands and I'm getting, you know, the demons jumping up into my head. Uh, how are they judging me? It, and within my situation, my accident and stuff, I have scars all over the place,
Sure.
all the way up the bottom side of my forearm. Are they looking at that? What are they thinking? All of this. So we start playing those head games, and it took a few weeks for me to step back and work through being okay to be naked in front of the public
Mhm.
again and stuff. So, this whole life is a journey. And you've told me so many times how much more work it has taken for you mentally with just missing. And so everyone knows the distal is just the furthermost joint on two fingers, which very much it is very little percentage wise, but is still so big in our world.
When you think about where your nerve endings are centralized, your lips, your genitals, your fingertips, you've got so much going on there. So even as you said, when you reach to do something and you miss that, and I know I have to be cautious when I'm reaching for a door handle because I'm reaching with these two fingers. These
Yeah,
don't have a whole lot of function to them. Like you, I spend a lot of time
yeah,
with a hand therapist, and people don't realize that a hand therapist is kind of hard to come across. It's a specialized field. Beyond physical therapy, they have additional training. I have some use, but not much. So to open a door, to open the door of the car, I have to use these two fingers to put into the handle. It's just those simple things that you take for granted every day. But along the way, I have come to realize that a lot of people carry a lot of scars. Most of us do. Once we hit adulthood, we carry a lot of scars, be they physical or emotional. Ours you can see. When I'm walking again, I'm normally 98% of the time I'm in shorts. People see the prosthesis on my leg. I get stopped at least once a week by complete strangers who want to talk to me about what's happened or about the design of my socket. I have hot rod flames on my socket. And so I get compliments about that all the time, which is cool. It's good that it's something that makes them feel comfortable in addressing it rather than just feeling bad about even having noticed it. I don't care if you notice it. Um, as a matter of fact, I'd like to think that I'm opening a conversation that perhaps the next person they see, they won't immediately feel sympathy for. They'll be interested and understand that most of us have a pretty good sense of humor about what's happened to us. We have to have, or we go crazy. Um, but ideally, the next person that they meet, they'll be more comfortable around. And I'm sure that you, and even in your dancing, you're becoming an ambassador for the limb loss or limb difference community and letting people know Jeff is just like everyone else. We can see his scars, but he may not be able to see ours. He doesn't know what we've been through, but they can see ours, and it's okay. I'm so sorry. One of the side effects of the gangrene, I did get to keep my right leg, but well, as I said, most of it, except my foot is damaged. But one of the side effects of that gangrene was some vascular issues in my right leg. And so if I retain fluids in my leg swells. And so it was doing so earlier this week, and I had to take a diuretic this morning, so it was suddenly go lose some of those fluids.
and that the biggest thing that I've come to realize and go with is to have empathy and compassion, but also we're on a journey. So often we look at things as I just want this to end. Come to this point, all will be good. And the only time it's an end is when we pass away. And coming to that realization that life is a journey, we're just in a chapter of that journey at this point in time. You know, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year is a different chapter of that journey. And we need to have empathy and compassion for ourselves and others. I coined the phrase, or I use it a lot. We don't know what we don't know. I give a lot of credit and compassion to all the doctors, the therapists, the CPOs for giving us the technology that we have. But at the same time, unless they're an amputee, they can't feel what we feel. And I go through, I jokingly say, and I'm pretty confident in saying this, that I have the most hands out there. And losing track, I think I'm up to 12 now, of which, you know, the nice thing about my point design is when I call it a hand, I get a new frame because my hand has changed size or something, and we just put the components on the new frame, of which literally as we get through today, I'll be running down to get another hand to try out and stuff, something that they're working on to, and I get to be the test dummy, so to speak. But with that being said, I think back to the first time I put my prosthesis on, and the CPOs are sitting there and they look at me and they say, well, how's it feel? And you're like, I don't know. How's it supposed to feel? Feels like I'm wearing a cast with fingers attached to the end of it. But through this process and all these examples, and every single one of them fits a little different, I assume that it's the same with you and sockets. Everyone is a little bit different, but I now know what good feels like. And the number one thing is comfort. If it doesn't feel good, we won't wear it. We might wear it for periods of time to do specific tasks to make our life better and easier. But as soon as we come to some type of stopping point, a relax, a breath of fresh air, we will be taking it off if it's not comfortable. Is that not true?
It is true. It is true. And you're right. I tend to wear my leg, and I do refer to it as my leg. It is not that thing. It is my leg now. I put it on in the morning to get out of bed. If I have to get up in the middle of the night, I have to put my leg on. I can't sleep in it. It presents too much danger with all of the metal, um, all the screws, nuts, and bolts that the sharp edges could damage my healthy limb. So I obviously cannot sleep in it. Most amputees cannot. Um, so if we have to get up in the middle of the night, we have to put our legs on or use another device for ambulation. So for us, it's a little bit beyond just not being able to touch something. or not being able to grab a hold of something, but literally it's the difference between being crippled and being ambulatory. So I put my leg on first thing in the morning. I wear it all day. I might pop the seal when I'm driving my car so that it releases not quite as tight. But as soon as I start to get out of the car, I have to put myself back together. I was telling a friend yesterday, one of my clients had called and wanted me to do something. I'd stepped away from the computer, and as one of those rare occasions when I had dismantled my leg. So I was teasing him, said that, I may be the only one of your clients that when I say, give me a second to pull myself together, I'm being quite literal about that. So I literally had put myself back together before I'm functional again. As I stepped away from the computer, and he called me and wanted me to do something that he had some things I had to get to his website. And so I need to be at the computer to do that. It means I had to come back around the house and get back to the computer again. And those things we take for granted, but I am a certified peer visitor for the Amputee Coalition. I lead a peer support group out of Emory University's hospital system, and also for the East Coast for the Amputee Coalition. And one of the first things I tell people who are recent amputees is that when you get your prosthesis, don't be surprised that it doesn't feel natural. It never feels like your organic leg might feel, or your fingers. It's just not. It's never going to feel natural. It's a sensation you become accustomed to. When I wear the silicone covers, the cosmesis covers on my fingers, it doesn't feel natural. It feels like I've got very tight band-aids on my fingers at all times. So I'm always aware of that pressure. Um, it's never going to feel natural, but it will feel better than a bad fit if it's actually fitted properly. If it's not a good fit, and I've had prosthetic legs that did not fit properly, um, that were too tight or that were too loose, and so it does make a difference. But you don't know early on, especially with your first fitting. You don't know what to expect because you've only got two things that you have experience with. That is what your limb felt like when it was healthy, or what your limb felt like after it was damaged. In my case, my left leg, which is amputated, I still at all times feel like my leg is complete. My proprioception is pretty amazing. The way that my nerves function, it still feels like I've got a leg, but it feels like my leg is severely damaged. Um, and those months between the heart attack and the coma and the amputation, while gangrene was doing what it did to my body, it locked my foot into position. And most of the time, it feels as if my foot is still locked. I can wiggle my calf and I feel like I'm bending my foot. I feel like I'm bending my toes. But in fact, my prosthesis does not function in that way at all. So it does not bend. But those muscles up higher still have those nerves. And so they feel as if there's some movement there. But underneath it all, there's always that feeling that, yeah, it's there, but it's not. So it's a very strange thing. But even with these peer support groups, you were pointing out the difference in the amount that was lost. Yes, might have lost more meat, but you lost a lot of nerve endings in those three fingers. There's a lot of function in those hands. Um, I just spoke with someone who is going to be coming to our local peer support group on Tuesday of next week. And he was saying when he first called me, he said, I don't know if I'm even welcome. I've only lost a couple of fingers. And my response was very simple to those people who have had a physical loss. It doesn't matter what the quantity is. It's that we were all going through this loss together. And there is as much an emotional loss in losing part of a finger as there is in losing a leg.
And that is
For you.
so true. It, it, when you were talking about sleeping and stuff, it's very interesting because a year ago I had to travel. Um, I had a family member pass away. And so because of my scheduling and such, I was taking the red eye through your town to Memphis. Um,
We just have to come through
Friday
Atlanta.
night,
If you're
Friday night
flying, you're
to
coming through Atlanta.
Friday to Saturday, and then Sunday I did it in reverse. And in that fact, at that time, I went 40 hours straight wearing my prosthesis, of which medical director for Point Designs, I was telling him the story, and he looked at me and he goes, did you take your shoes off? I go, yeah, on the plane, I took my shoes off. And he's like, well, why didn't you take your hand off? And, in my case, it's somewhere around $30,000 on my hand.
Right.
And the fear in my head that, you know, and this is totally my joke to leg amputees, they can't get out of bed without putting their leg on.
Mhm.
Us finger partial hands have the challenge of forgetting where we left our hands.
Okay.
Have you not at
Um,
times misplaced your finger tips?
no, no, but I did panic when one fell off as I was leaving choir rehearsal, and looked down and noticed that my finger was bare. And thankfully, I was with a buddy, and he said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I lost my finger." He said, "What?" I said, "I lost my artificial finger, my prosthesis. I need to find that. This is X number of hundreds of dollars for just
Yeah.
a silicone cover." But he went back, was tracing my steps while I was looking around the parking lot. He went back into the building, and he did find it and brought it back. I said, "Is this it?" I said, "Yes." But it's a terrible feeling when you when you misplace them. Now, normally I leave them in my medicine cabinet at night before I go to bed because I don't take them off until I'm heading to bed typically. But it's a very bad feeling of how much money it's going to cost to replace and how long it's going to take to replace. Because I know with these fitted to my hand and uh, colored to be pretty darn close to my skin tone, it's going to take a couple of months to get a replacement in.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because I just realized this in our discussion and thinking about it um, over the course of time and going back to comfort and what feels good and stuff. What put that fear in my head was several years ago when I didn't have a prosthesis that fit well and was comfortable. I would come home and the first thing I would do is take it off. And, you know, at the time I was living in my RV, I'd walk in the door and just toss it in one of the chairs. I just, it was the way it was. There was a time that I had the opportunity to speak in London to the International Hand Surgeons Conference. And I come home. I had been flying for 13 hours. I'd been up for like 24, 26 hours. And a friend picks me up at the airport, and it's an hour home from the airport. And again, I didn't have a good fitting prosthesis at that time that was comfortable. And the first thing I did was get in the car and peeled my hand off and threw it in the back seat. And I get home.
That was $30,000 in the back seat.
Hey, it's in my vehicle. But I get home and, I hop in the shower, I crash and wake up 6, 8 hours later. And it's like, okay, where did I leave my hand? So since I should have put a patent on this, most of mine have air tags on them so that I can find them anywhere in the world, because there's always an Apple iPhone somewhere close by. They're great. I had a friend that is a amputee, and hers was stolen out of her vehicle,
Oh.
of which she was a self-pay, and she had to come up with the money a second time for it. So, we just don't know what's going to happen. Every day is different. I still reach for the doorknobs with my right dominant hand. I'm getting more relaxed on myself now. I don't beat myself up as much as saying, at what point in time are you going to learn to use the hand that will open that door? I I really cherry pick things a lot. I've learned on this journey that I love driving my vehicle, and I think you might have a little challenge. I like driving, and it's easy because I'm opening and shutting the door with my left hand, which is whole. If I'm a passenger, I always sit behind the driver. If there's more than one of us, if I'm just in the passenger seat, I'm a fish out of water trying to reach over to shut the door and stuff. Because the other thing that comes into play is, as we age and our body changes, my finger has a curve to it, because if I'm not wearing a prosthesis, I'm having to reach across. So I have a lot of issues that are developing in my pinky on my right side. I'm having overuse issues in my thumb on my left side. And a few years ago, I had surgery to my left shoulder, of which at that time, the surgeon told me my next surgery will be a shoulder replacement.
Frightening.
Yes, of which, I really, again, going to the journey aspect early on, I was going big, trying to figure out what I could still do, what I could still lift, how I could do this, how I could do that. And that's what kind of overuse and tore up this side. Now the journey is, okay, I need to protect what I have left. And it's the journey of keeping as much mobility without hurting what's left.
And that's one of the things that a lot of physical therapists teach us is the importance of protecting the organic. Um, for people with limb loss, or particularly lower extremity limb loss, they tell us constantly, do not jump, do not jump. You see people online, on Facebook, there are video clips of people jumping around without their legs on. Okay, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy, because as you get older, that damage happens anyway. But when you're reliant on that one remaining limb, what are you going to do when that knee is worn out and you're missing your other leg? You can't just typically you cannot stand for any period of time on that prosthesis if your leg is in a socket and then pressing down, you're standing on a pole. So trying to balance
Yeah.
that is virtually impossible. But you're taking a chance on damaging the healthy limb by doing this. I was at a college yesterday dealing with physical therapy students, and they brought in three amputees to talk to them about amputation, about their particular needs with physical therapy, and their experience with limb loss and also with prosthetics. And one of the fellows was former military. He was demonstrating a running blade, and for most of us, our insurance will cover typically one leg. We're working with Congress and with our states now to try and pass a piece of legislation called So Everybody Can Move. And that would require insurance companies to actually give you enough prosthetics that you're going to be functional. So, for example, the leg that I wear most of the time cannot be submerged. So I could not get into a swimming pool with it. I cannot get into a shower with it. Um, I'm reliant on other resources for that. Now, I was able to get a swim leg, which is great, but it's not as functional as you would hope. It's still very, very limiting. But this fellow was demonstrating a running blade, and I turned around and he is jumping up and down on the floor. And number one, his jumps are pretty amazing. He was clearing at least 8 inches off the floor.
Yeah.
And I was laughing with one of the students. He was asking about coming to our peer support group this Tuesday night. And I turn on looking, this guy is clearing the floor by 6 inches. I'm sorry, 8 inches. And I looked at the student who's getting his doctoral degree next year. I said, yeah, I can't do that. And he said, you can't. I said, number one, I'm not in a running blade, so the energy return in a standard prosthetic foot, it's fixed. So you have very little energy return. And since I'm missing toes on that right foot and damage to the interior bones as well, I can't do that. I can't leap anymore. But those people who do it, they're taking a lot of chances with damaging what they've got left. And it is, as you get older, you're right. It's going to be a big deal.
Yes. Uh, Again, I think there's a learning curve and a cycle. Um, we're starting to transition more from all that inspiration of Paralympians and jumping and running to no end to being more open, honest, and real about our struggles and, you know, doing too much and overworking what is left. And we're seeing that trend more so now, which is good, you know, to because some of us, depending upon the age of whether we're congenital or, have an accident, have a long life ahead of us.
Right.
And we need that. I work in my state trying to help move along with so everyone can movement. Also, just because I don't think there's, well, I can't say it. There's probably third world countries where individuals only have one pair of shoes. Uh, but in here in the US, 99% of the US population has more than one pair of shoes to wear for whatever task they are doing. And we need to be open and realize that in order to make us more whole and complete, we need to have those opportunities because nothing replaces original equipment. These prostheses make our lives better. They are tools, but there's not a single one out there that does it all. They all have their limitations. So we need to have the opportunity to have multiple ones to make our lives more whole and complete.
No matter what we get right now, the very best prosthesis, as you were getting at, does not replace the full function of an organic limb or extremity. I cannot stand on my toes because my ankle is fixed. I can't do it. So the simple act of standing up on your tiptoes, now, like you're 3 years old, I can't do that again. With prosthesis, my foot simply will not elevate. As I was speaking with one of my physical therapists who is very well educated in what is available in prosthetics, I was asking if there was something that would give me more of a push off when I was walking, like my organic foot would, like my toes would.
Hmm.
And she said, no, there's just not. And if you look at the mechanics of the foot, it's truly remarkable that you can stand on your toes because you're tightening those muscles in your calves and lifting yourself up. In fact, if you look at human weight and the machinery that would be required to lift a human being up onto their toes in a prosthesis, that would be huge. It would literally be a large piece of equipment. You can't put that into a functional prosthesis and make it work. Just doesn't work. I found a manufacturer who had a spring-loaded toe, and I thought, well, this will be pretty cool. So I called them and spoke to them about what they were doing and if this would be a good option for me when I replaced my foot. And they said, well, you're a K4. This is not. This is the K2 maybe, but it doesn't have any strength to actually raise you. So this just helps with walking when you can barely walk anyway. But for someone of your strength level and your possibilities, which is what your K level is how much you will potentially be able to do with that prosthesis. But with your ambulation and all of your skills, this is going to be completely useless to you. So I learned to deal with the fact that there are certain small movements like that that I took for granted. When I was a young man, I was a dancer. I can't do that anymore. I can't point my toes. I can't stand on my toes. No, I can't do that. I could dance with a flexed foot, but I'm never going to be able to point my toe again. So
Yeah,
that's simple things that we don't think about because hey, Oscar Pistorius, he ran against people with both legs and he beat them. It's pretty
yeah,
amazing. But
yeah,
those legs, there's certain things that you cannot do with them. You cannot stand flat foot on a running blade. Just can't.
yeah, yeah. Well, we're coming to the end now. I thank you so much for being with us, Rex, today. We had a great conversation. There's still more things to talk about, and I'm going to leave the door open for another discussion down the road because, you know, there are just so many things that people don't realize are challenges for us until you get put into the situation. You just never know what you don't know. Thank you, Rex.
Thank you, Jeff. Have a wonderful afternoon.
You too.